Widow accepted a crooked house as payment, but what she found underneath it, Martha Sullivan never imagined she would accept a leaning house as a solution to her problems. A widow for 3 years, she was caring for 6 orphaned children her late husband had taken in over the years, and the debts were piling up faster than her ability to pay them. That's when Mr. Silas Vance knocked on the door of her small rented house in Clear Creek, in the countryside of Kentucky, with a proposal she never expected to hear. "Mrs. Martha, I came to talk about the debt you had with Mr. Arthur," said the merchant, adjusting his sweaty hat. $3,000 is not a small amount, and I know you're having a hard time." Martha dried her hands on her apron and invited him in. The children were playing in the backyard, their cheerful voices contrasting with the tension that filled the air whenever the subject was money. "Mr. Silas, you know I can't pay that whole amount at once. Ever since my Arthur passed, I haven't been able to keep the workshop running. That's exactly why I'm here," he replied, pulling a crumpled paper from his pocket. "I have a rural property that's no use to me anymore. It's yours if you settle the debt." Martha looked at the paper with suspicion. She had known Silas for years and knew he didn't do business without profiting somehow. "What kind of property?" "A house with good, wooded land. It's about 20 kilometers from here, on the road to Blue Ridge." "And why do you want to get rid of it like that?" Silas hesitated for a moment, nervously fidgeting with his hat. "The truth is, the house has some minor structural issues. Nothing that can't be fixed with a little effort." Martha felt a tightness in her chest. When someone like Silas talked about minor issues, it usually meant something serious. "Can I see the property before deciding?" Of course, but the offer is only good until tomorrow." "I have another interested party." All this rush made Martha even more suspicious, but her situation was desperate. The landlord of the house they lived in had raised the rent and given her 30 days to decide. Either pay the new amount or leave. With 6 children to raise, she didn't have many options. The next morning, Martha borrowed the neighbor's truck and took the 3 oldest children to see the property. James, 12 years old, was the most questioning of the group. Sarah, 10, always looked for the bright side of situations, and Charlie, 9, had the gift of making everyone laugh, even in difficult times. The dirt road wound through pine trees and scrubland typical of the region. As they approached the location indicated by Silas, Martha noticed the vegetation became denser and the path narrower. "Look over there, Aunt Martha," shouted Sarah, pointing to a clearing ahead. Martha stepped on the brake and fell silent for a few seconds, trying to process what she saw. Before her was a wooden house with a thatch roof, surrounded by ancient trees, but there was something profoundly wrong with the structure. "Good Lord," murmured James, "the house is falling over." And it really was. The small building leaned to one side so sharply it seemed it would collapse at any moment. Several improvised wooden stakes propped up the side that threatened to give way. "This can't be happening," Martha whispered, feeling tears form in her eyes. "Auntie, we can fix it," said Sarah, ever optimistic. "Dad always said there's no problem without a solution." Martha got out of the truck on trembling legs. The children followed her, curious and a little scared. As they approached the house, they could see the tilt was even more severe than it seemed from afar. "Look at this," said James, walking around the structure. "It looks like this whole side sank into the ground." Martha examined the foundation and noticed that some of the stone footings supporting the house had given way or simply disappeared. It was as if someone had intentionally removed the supports from one side. "This was done on purpose," she murmured, more to herself than to the children. "What did you say, Aunt?" asked Charlie. "Nothing important, my boy. Let's see what's inside." The front door was so misaligned that Martha had to push hard to open it. Inside, the slanted floor made it difficult to walk normally. All the furniture left behind was piled against the lowest wall. "It's like a slide in here," joked Charlie, sliding down the slanted floor to the back wall. Sarah and James laughed, but Martha couldn't find the humor in the situation. How could she raise 6 children in a place like this? It was practically uninhabitable. Outside, she sat on a fallen log and put her head in her hands. The children approached, worried. "Aunt Martha, don't be sad," said Sarah, putting her small arm around the woman's shoulders. "We always figure something out." You don't understand, dears. We have nowhere to go. If I don't accept this house, we'll have to be separated." "Separated how?" asked James, his voice tense. Martha took a deep breath before answering. She had promised herself she would always be honest with the children, even when the truth hurt. "The money we have is barely enough for food. I can't pay a higher rent. If we don't have a place to live, you'll have to go to different homes, with families who can care for you." The silence that followed was broken only by the song of birds in the surrounding trees. Martha saw tears forming in the children's eyes, and her heart broke a little more. "Then let's fix this house," said James, with a determination that surprised Martha. "It can't be that hard." "James, dear, it's not that simple." "Why not, Aunt?" Sarah joined her older brother. "We work together like we always have. Dad taught us that when the family comes together, there's no obstacle we can't overcome." Martha looked at the children's determined faces and felt something stir in her chest. Maybe it was madness, but they were right about one thing. They had nothing to lose by trying. "All right," she said, standing up and wiping her tears. "Let's go back home and get the others. If we're going to live here, let it be with everyone together." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The walk back to Clear Creek was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Martha tried to formulate a mental plan for how she could make that house livable, while the children imagined what it would be like to live in a crooked house. Arriving home, she gathered everyone in the small living room. Besides James, Sarah, and Charlie, there was 7-year-old Peter, the 5-year-old twins Annie and Allie, and little Johnny, just 3 years old. "Children, I need to talk to you about our future," Martha began, sitting on the floor to be at eye level with the younger ones. Johnny climbed into her lap, as he always did when he sensed something important was happening. The twins positioned themselves on either side, while Peter sat cross-legged, his eyes wide with curiosity. "You know our situation here isn't easy. Money is tight, and the rent has gone up." "Do we have to leave, Aunt Martha?" asked Annie, the shyer twin. "Yes, dear. But we found a place we can go. It's a house out in the scrubland, with lots of space for you to play." "There's something wrong with the house, isn't there?" Peter was surprisingly perceptive for his age. Martha sighed. It was no use trying to fool the children. They always found out the truth anyway. "Yes, there is, Peter. The house is a bit crooked. It's going to need a lot of work to fix it." "Crooked how?" asked Allie. James stepped forward and explained to his younger siblings what they had seen. As he described the leaning house, Martha watched the children's reactions. To her surprise, none of them seemed scared or discouraged. "So it's like a boat?" asked Johnny, his eyes shining. "It's a bit like that, yes," replied Sarah, laughing. "That's so cool. I've never lived on a boat," said the boy, clapping his little hands. Martha couldn't help but smile at the children's innocence and optimism. They turned any situation into an adventure. "But it's going to be hard, everyone. We'll have to work a lot to make the house livable." "We're not afraid of work," said Peter, puffing out his chest. "We're the Sullivan family." The others agreed enthusiastically, and Martha felt a wave of pride and emotion. Her late husband had truly raised a close-knit and determined family. "All right then. Tomorrow morning we'll go get our things and move. But I want everyone to understand it's not going to be easy. We'll spend a few days, maybe weeks, living in difficult conditions." "It can't be worse than being apart," murmured Sarah, and everyone agreed. That night Martha could barely sleep. She turned over all the practical details of the move and the necessary repairs in her head. How would she manage to straighten an entire house? Where would she get money for materials? What if the structure was damaged beyond repair? Her worries were interrupted by small footsteps in the hallway. Annie appeared in the bedroom door, carrying her rag doll. "Aunt Martha, I can't sleep." "Come here, sweetheart." The girl slipped under the covers next to Martha, who hugged her tenderly. "Are you scared of the new house?" "A little, but more scared of us being separated." Martha squeezed the girl to her chest, feeling her heart tighten. "That won't happen, Annie, I promise you. We'll all stay together no matter what. Even if the house falls down, we'll figure out a way to fix it." Annie snuggled in better, and was asleep within minutes. Martha kept looking at the girl's serene little face, mentally renewing her determination. She would do anything to keep this family together. The next morning, they woke up early to organize the move. Martha had borrowed an old pickup truck from Mr. George, who lived next door and was always willing to help. "Mrs. Martha, are you sure you want to go to that place?" asked George, worried, as they loaded the few pieces of furniture. "I've heard that house is in terrible shape." "We don't have a choice, Mr. George. It's what we could get. If you need anything, just send one of the boys to get me. I don't live far." Martha thanked her neighbor for his kindness, knowing she would probably need his help soon. The trip to the new house was lively. The children sang songs that Arthur used to teach them and made wild plans about what their new life in the middle of nature would be like. "I'm going to build a tree house," declared James. "And I'm going to plant flowers everywhere," said Sarah. "I'm going to teach the birds to talk," announced Charlie, always creative. Arriving at the property, however, the general mood dampened a little. In the daylight, the house looked even more precarious than Martha remembered. Several boards on the side were loose. The roof had visible leaks and the whole structure groaned in the wind. "Wow," murmured Peter, "it really is crooked." The twins clung to Martha's skirts, a little intimidated. Johnny, however, ran toward the house as if it were the most fun playground in the world. "Be careful, Johnny," shouted Martha, running after him. The boy had started climbing up the slanted wall as if it were a slide, laughing loudly. James reached him first and grabbed him before he could get hurt. "Johnny, this house isn't for playing. It's dangerous," Martha scolded him gently. "But it's fun, Auntie." "It might be, but first we need to make it safe. Only then can we play." They spent the first hour unloading their few possessions and exploring the property. The land was truly beautiful, with leafy trees, a small creek at the back, and plenty of space for the children to run. "At least the place itself is good," commented Sarah, always looking for the positive side. "That's true," agreed Martha. "If we can fix up the house, it could be a wonderful place for you all to grow up." But reality set in when they tried to organize a place to sleep. The floor was so slanted, it made it impossible to place the mattresses level. Everything slid toward the lower side of the house. "We'll have to improvise," said Martha, trying to keep the optimism in her voice. They used rocks and pieces of wood to create small steps in the floor, trying to level the mattresses. It wasn't perfect, but at least they managed to create little corners where each child could lie down without rolling downhill. During the first night in the crooked house, Martha lay awake, listening to the strange sounds the structure made. Wood creaked, nails groaned, and she had a constant feeling that everything could collapse at any moment. But more disturbing than the noises was the growing certainty that this slant hadn't been caused by natural deterioration. The more she observed, the more convinced she became that someone had deliberately sabotaged the house's foundations. The next morning, while the children explored the surroundings, Martha decided to examine the base of the building more closely. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Several of the stones that should have supported the side of the house had been recently removed. The earth around them showed clear signs of digging, and some of the wooden supports had fresh saw marks. "Someone did this on purpose," she murmured, feeling a mix of anger and determination growing in her chest. "Did what, Aunt Martha?" James had approached without her noticing. Martha hesitated. Should she involve the children in this discovery? On the other hand, they had a right to know the truth about their new home. "Come here, James. I want to show you something." She explained to the boy what she had discovered, showing him the evidence of sabotage. James, being mature for his age, immediately understood the implications. "Did Mr. Silas know about this when he offered you the house?" "I'm almost certain he did. In fact, I'm starting to suspect he ordered it done himself." "But why?" Martha sighed, gathering her thoughts before answering. "I'm not sure, son. But men like Silas never do anything without a reason. If he wanted to get rid of this property quickly, it's because there's something here he doesn't want us to find. Or something he wants us to find," suggested James, surprising Martha with his insight. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, Auntie, but if he knew the house was sabotaged and still offered it to you, maybe he wants us to live here for some specific reason." Martha was impressed by the boy's reasoning. He was right. Silas could be trying to use them somehow. You're very clever, James, but that doesn't change the fact that we need a place to live. And for now, this is the only one we have. Then let's fix this house quickly. And who knows, in the process, maybe we'll find out what that man really wants. The determination in the boy's voice was contagious. He was right. The best way to deal with the situation was to move forward with repairing the house, keeping their eyes open for any clues about Silas's true intentions. They spent the rest of the morning studying the damaged structure and trying to come up with a plan of action. Sarah joined the conversation when she realized something important was being discussed. "The first thing we need to do is lift this side of the house," said James, pointing to the side that had sunk. "How are we going to do that?" asked Sarah. "With levers," replied Mrs. Martha. "Your father used to say that with a lever big enough, a man can move mountains." "But we're not men," observed Sarah. "No, but we are 7 people working together, and that's worth a lot more than 1 man alone." The children smiled, excited by the prospect of having a clear mission. Mrs. Martha, in turn, began to make a mental list of everything they would need: wood for levers, ropes, stones for wedges, and above all, a lot of patience. "First, we'll have to dig around the foundation to understand exactly what happened," explained Mrs. Martha. "Then we find a way to lift the house and put the supports back in the right place." "And if we can't?" asked Sarah, ever practical. Mrs. Martha looked at the leaning house, then at the hopeful faces of the children, and felt a fierce determination take hold of her heart. "We will, dear, we have no choice." And they began to work. Mrs. Martha took an old hoe she had found in a small shed at the back of the property, while the children used pieces of wood and even their hands to dig around the base of the house. It was hard, slow work, especially with the strong sun that began to beat down as the morning wore on. The younger children soon grew tired and went to play in the shade of the trees, but the older ones persisted. It was Charlie who made the first interesting discovery. "Aunt Martha, there's something strange here." Mrs. Martha dropped the hoe and ran to where the boy was digging. There, buried in the soft earth, was a small metal box about the size of a cookie tin. "What do you think it is?" asked Sarah, approaching curiously. "There's only one way to find out," replied Mrs. Martha, picking up the box and shaking the dirt off it. The box was rusty but not completely deteriorated. It had a small lock that was already corroded enough to be broken easily. "Open it, Auntie," begged James, barely containing his curiosity. Mrs. Martha used a stone to break the lock and carefully opened the box. Inside, wrapped in an oilcloth, was a paper yellowed with age. "A letter," she murmured, carefully unfolding the document. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by an elderly person, but still legible. "To whoever finds this letter, my name is Samuel Sterling, and this was my home for 43 years. If you are reading this, it means someone has managed to buy or take possession of my property. I hope you are a good person, because I have an important story to tell. When I learned my health was failing and I didn't have much time left, I decided to hide the savings of a lifetime here on the land. I don't trust banks, and my only relatives are greedy people who are just waiting for me to pass so they can fight over the inheritance. The money is buried in a safe spot on the property, but it can only be found when the house is perfectly level. I use the tilt as protection. As long as the house is crooked, the treasure remains hidden. If you are willing to fix this house and give it the care it deserves, then you also deserve what I've kept here. It's $15,000 in cash, enough to fix everything and still have some left for a decent life. May God bless whoever cares for my home. Samuel Sterling, December 1998. Martha finished reading the letter in silence, her hands trembling. The children watched her anxiously. "What does it say, Aunt Martha?" asked Sarah. Martha looked at the expectant faces around her and felt her heart race. $15,000! It was far more money than she could have dreamed of. With that amount, they could not only completely renovate the house, but also have financial security for a good while. "It says there's a treasure buried here," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "A real treasure," exclaimed Charlie, his eyes wide. "A real one. But we can only find it after we straighten the house." "So that's why someone made it crooked," exclaimed James. "So no one could find the treasure." Martha nodded, the pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place in her mind. Silas knew about the hidden money. That's why he had sabotaged the house, to discourage other interested parties, while he himself couldn't find the treasure because he didn't have the letter with the instructions. "But if he knew about the money, why did he give us the house?" asked Sarah. "Because he couldn't find it on his own," replied Martha. "And now he's betting that we'll do the hard work for him. He's probably hoping we'll give up and abandon the property, or that he'll find an excuse to take the house back after we straighten it." "That's not going to happen," declared James with determination. "This house is ours now, and the treasure too." Martha smiled at the boy, admiring his courage, but inside she felt a growing worry. If her suspicions were correct, Silas wouldn't give up easily, and that could put the whole family in danger. "Listen carefully, children," she said, adopting a serious tone. "We can't tell anyone about this letter or about the treasure. If Silas finds out, he might try to harm us." "Harm us how?" asked Sarah, with a hint of fear in her voice. "I'm not sure, dear, but greedy men are capable of anything. Let's keep it a secret among ourselves and work to straighten the house as quickly as possible." The children solemnly agreed, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Martha carefully put the letter away, and they returned to work with renewed energy. Now, however, every swing of the hoe had a much clearer purpose. They weren't just trying to get a place to live, they were fighting for their financial independence and for the future of the whole family. The work continued for the rest of the day. As they dug around the foundation, they discovered more evidence of the sabotage. Several support stones had been recently removed, and some wooden beams had precise cuts that clearly weren't the result of natural deterioration. "This Silas is smarter than we thought," commented Martha, examining one of the cuts. "He sabotaged the house to look like natural wear." "But not smart enough to find the treasure on his own," replied James with a hint of satisfaction in his voice. When the sun began to set, they stopped for a simple snack and to assess the day's progress. They had dug almost all the way around the house and identified exactly which supports needed to be put back. "Tomorrow we'll start straightening it for real," announced Martha. "How are we going to do that, Auntie?" asked Peter, who had joined the work group in the afternoon. "With ropes and levers. We'll lift it a little at a time until we can put the support stones back in the right place." "What if the house breaks?" "It's not going to break," replied Martha, with more conviction than she truly felt. "This house was built to last. We just need to treat it with care and patience." That second night in the crooked house, Martha stayed awake even longer. The discovery of the letter had changed everything. Now it wasn't just about having a roof over their heads. It was about securing true stability for her and the children. But it also meant they had a far more dangerous adversary than they had imagined. Silas wasn't just a greedy merchant. He was someone willing to sabotage and manipulate to get what he wanted. Martha left the house quietly and sat on the front steps, looking at the stars shining brightly in the unpolluted sky of the countryside. Wherever he was, her Arthur would certainly approve of the fight she was waging to keep the family together. "You always said what doesn't kill us makes us stronger," she murmured to the night wind. "I hope you're right, my love." A strange noise made her alert. It sounded like footsteps in the woods surrounding the property. Martha stayed still, trying to identify the source of the sound, but after a few minutes of silence, she concluded it must have been some wild animal. Even so, she slept even more restlessly than the night before. The morning of the third day brought an unpleasant surprise. Martha woke up and discovered that several of the tools they had left outside the house had simply disappeared overnight. "It can't be," she murmured, searching for the hoe and shovel she had definitely left leaning against the house wall. "Aunt Martha, where are the tools?" asked James, approaching with a sleepy face. "They're gone, all of them." "Gone how?" "Someone took them during the night." James was silent for a few moments, processing the information. "It was Silas, wasn't it?" Martha sighed. The boy was too perceptive for his age. "Probably. Or someone on his orders." "But why would he do that? Doesn't he get what he wants if we give up?" "That's exactly it, James. He wants us to give up and leave. That way he can come back here and search for the treasure at his leisure. So he knows about the money." "He must. The question is, how did he find out?" They kept talking as the other children woke up and became aware of the missing tools. The general reaction was indignation. "That's not fair," declared Sarah. "How are we going to work without tools?" "We'll manage," replied Martha with determination. "Men like Silas think taking our tools is enough to make us surrender, but they forget that determined people always find a way." And they did. Martha remembered she had seen some rusty tools in the small shed out back. They weren't in good condition, but they were still useful. Besides, they improvised other tools using pieces of wood and stones. "Look at this," said Charlie, brandishing a wooden stick he had sharpened with a stone. "It's almost like a hoe." The children's creativity in improvising tools impressed Martha. In no time, they had an improvised but functional arsenal. The day's work focused on preparing the levers they would use to lift the house. Martha remembered the physics lessons she had learned in school decades ago. With a proper fulcrum and a lever long enough, it would be possible to lift a considerable weight. "The problem," she explained to the children, "is that we need to lift the whole house at once, not just a piece." "Why don't we make several levers?" suggested Sarah. "That's a good idea. If we place 3 or 4 levers at different points, we can lift the whole side together." They spent the day looking for long, sturdy logs that could serve as levers. They found some fallen pine trees in the woods that, after being cleared of branches, would serve the purpose perfectly. "This one must be about 20 feet long," commented James, helping to drag one of the logs. "Perfect. The longer the lever, the less force we need to use." While they worked, Martha noticed more signs that someone had been prowling around the property during the night. Fresh footprints in the soft earth near the creek, broken branches in places they hadn't passed through, and even some strange marks on the trees near the house. "Someone is watching us," she commented to James when the others were playing. "What are we going to do?" "For now, we keep working, but I'll talk to Mr. George to see if he can keep an eye on our property at night." "Do you think he'll want to help?" "I'm sure he will. Mr. George is a good person." At the end of the day, Martha left the children playing under the supervision of James and Sarah, and borrowed the old bicycle they had found in the shed to go to town and talk to the neighbor. Mr. George was watering the plants in the yard when she arrived. "Mrs. Martha, how is the adjustment going in the new house?" "Complicated, Mr. George. Actually, that's what I came to talk to you about." She told him about the missing tools and the evidence that someone was prowling around the property, but didn't mention anything about the letter or the treasure. "That's not right," said George, shaking his head. "Private property is sacred. No one has the right to trespass. Do you think you could stop by there from time to time, just to see if everything is okay?" "Of course, Mrs. Martha. I can stop by every evening after work. If I see any suspicious movement, I'll yell real loud to scare off the intruders." Martha thanked the neighbor for his willingness and returned home with a lighter heart. At least they wouldn't be completely unprotected. When she arrived at the property, she found the children excitedly discussing strategies for the next day. They had discovered that, by using ropes tied to the levers, everyone could help in the effort to lift the house, even the youngest. "It's like tug of war, but in reverse," explained Charlie. "Instead of pulling against each other, we all pull to the same side." "And I'll give the command," announced Johnny, always wanting to be part of important decisions. Martha smiled at the scene. Adversity was making the family even more united and creative. "Very well thought out, everyone. Tomorrow we'll try to lift the house for the first time." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The 4th morning at the Crooked House dawned cloudy with the look of rain. Martha woke with a strange feeling, as if something important was about to happen. "Today is the day," she announced to the children during the improvised breakfast. "We're going to try to straighten our house." The children reacted with a mix of nervousness and excitement. They had worked so hard the last few days that the moment of truth seemed unreal. "What if we can't do it?" asked Annie, always worried. "Then we try again tomorrow," replied Martha, "and the next day if we have to. We don't give up until we succeed." They began by positioning the 4 levers at strategic points along the sunken side of the house. Martha had carefully studied the structure and identified the spots where the pressure would be best distributed. "Remember," she instructed the children, "we lift slowly and together. If anyone gets tired, speak up immediately. We don't want anyone to get hurt. The ropes were tied to the ends of the levers, creating a system where each person could contribute their strength. Even 3-year-old Johnny had his own little rope to pull. "Is everyone ready?" asked Martha, positioning herself at the main lever. "Ready," the children shouted in unison. "Then let's go. 1, 2, 3, pull." What happened next was both thrilling and frightening. The house actually moved. Not much, but enough to make everyone feel they had a real chance of success. "It's working," shouted Sarah, euphoric. "Keep pulling," ordered Martha. They maintained the pressure for almost a minute before their strength began to fail. When they released the ropes, the house returned to its original position, but now they knew it was possible to move it. "It worked," exclaimed James. "We can really lift this house." "Yes, we can," agreed Martha, breathless but excited. "The problem is, we don't have the strength to keep it lifted long enough to replace the supports." "Then we need more people," observed Sarah. "Or a way to keep the levers in place," suggested Charlie. Martha pondered both suggestions. Asking for help in town was risky. The more people who knew about the house, the greater the chance Silas would discover what they were doing. But Charlie's idea had merit. "You know what, Charlie? You might have a good idea there. If we can wedge the levers." "How so?" "Put something underneath them to maintain the pressure even after we let go of the ropes." The boy's eyes lit up. "Like wood blocks." "Exactly. We lift the house with the levers, wedge them quickly, and then we have time to calmly replace the supports." The new strategy required more preparation. They spent the rest of the morning cutting and adjusting pieces of wood that would serve as wedges. They needed various sizes to keep the levers in the correct position. "Timing will be very important," explained Martha. "One person will have to let go of the rope and place the wedge very quickly before the lever goes back down." "I'll do it," volunteered James. "I'm the fastest." "No, son, you're one of the strongest. I need you on the rope. I'll do it myself." "But Aunt Martha—" "No arguments, James. I know my strength and my limits." They tested the new plan several times without the house, just practicing the movements. Martha wanted to make sure everyone knew exactly what to do when the crucial moment arrived. "Very good," she said, satisfied with the rehearsal. "Now let's do it for real." The second attempt was more organized. Martha counted to 3, everyone pulled together, and when the house lifted as high as they could manage, she quickly positioned the wedges under the levers. "Now you can let go," she shouted. The children carefully released the ropes, ready to pull again if anything went wrong. But the wedges worked perfectly. The levers remained in position, keeping the side of the house raised. "We did it!" shouted Sarah, jumping for joy. "Not yet," Martha warned her. "Now comes the hardest part." They had only a few minutes before the makeshift wedges would give way under the weight. Martha and James scrambled under the raised house, working frantically to replace the support stones that had been removed. "Faster, Aunt Martha!" shouted Sarah, seeing one of the wedges begin to crack. "Almost done," Martha replied, adjusting the last stone. "It's ready," announced James. "Get out from under there," ordered Sarah. Martha and James crawled out of the confined space seconds before one of the wedges split completely. The house settled down, but now it was resting on the stones they had replaced. Everyone fell silent for a few moments, watching the house. The tilt had decreased significantly. It wasn't completely straight, but the difference was visible and encouraging. "Look at that," said Peter, admiration in his voice. "It works!" exclaimed Johnny, clapping his hands. Martha sat on the ground, exhausted but triumphant. They had proven it was possible. With patience and work, they could straighten the house completely. "Well done, family," she said, smiling at the happy faces around her. "We still have a lot of work ahead, but we've taken the first important step." "When are we going to do the rest?" asked Charlie, eager. "Tomorrow. We did quite a bit today. Let's rest and plan the next steps." But the rest didn't last long. Around midday they heard the sound of an engine approaching on the dirt road. Martha stood up, worried, and went to the front of the property to see who was arriving. It was Silas Vance, driving his red pickup truck with a not-so-friendly expression on his face. "Good morning, Mrs. Martha," he said, getting out of the vehicle uninvited. "Good morning, Mr. Silas. What brings you here?" "I came to see how you're all adapting to the new house." Martha noticed his eyes immediately went to the side of the house. observing that the lien had been reduced. His expression grew even darker. "I see you've been messing with the structure. We're trying to make the house more livable." "Mrs. Martha, I need to warn you about something important. This house has serious structural problems. Messing with the supports can be very dangerous, especially with children around." "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Silas, but we're taking all necessary precautions." "It's not just concern, Mrs. Martha. It's my responsibility. If there's an accident here, I'll be the one blamed for handing over a dangerous property." Martha felt a chill down her spine. Was he trying to discourage her or threaten her? "Are you suggesting we should leave?" "I'm suggesting you accept the offer I'm going to make. I'll buy the property back for $5,000. It's more than a house in this condition is worth." "The house is not for sale, Mr. Silas." $6,000. "It's not for sale at any price." Silas's face turned red with anger, but he tried to keep his composure. "Mrs. Martha, you're being reckless. These children depend on you to make smart decisions. And that's exactly why I won't accept your offer." Silas stood still for a few moments, clearly trying to think of another approach. "Very well, but I want to make it clear that I take no responsibility for any accident that might happen. And I strongly recommend you find an engineer before you keep messing with the structure." "Thank you for the suggestion." Silas took another look at the partially straightened house and went back to his pickup, but before leaving he made one last attempt. $8,000, Mrs. Martha. It's my final offer. And my final answer is no." He left in a cloud of dust, leaving Martha with a bad feeling. His insistence confirmed her suspicions. Silas knew about the treasure and was desperate to get the property back. The children approached, having watched the whole conversation from a distance. "He looked angry," commented Annie. "He was, sweetie. But don't worry. This house is ours now, and we're staying here." "Why did he want to buy it back if the house is as bad as he said?" asked Sarah, always logical. "Because he wasn't being honest about his reasons," answered Martha. James came closer to her and whispered, "He knows about the treasure, doesn't he?" Martha nodded discreetly. "But that just gives us one more reason to work faster." They spent the rest of the day planning the next step. The morning's experience had shown the method worked, but they would need to repeat the process several times to completely straighten the house. "Let's break it into stages," explained Martha. "Each day we lift it a little more until we can get everything level." "How long will it take?" asked Peter. "If we're lucky and there are no more interruptions, maybe a week. And if Silas comes back to bother us, we'll deal with that if it happens." But Martha knew Silas wouldn't give up easily. The offer of $8,000 for a property he had sold to settle a $3,000 debt made it clear there was much more at stake than appeared. That night she made a decision. She couldn't risk leaving the children unprotected on the property. She needed help, and knew only one person in the region she could trust completely. The next morning, she sent James to town with a message for Mr. George asking him to come talk urgently. The neighbor arrived mid-morning, worried by the urgent tone of the message. "Did something happen, Mrs. Martha?" "Mr. George, I need to ask a very big favor. But first, I have to tell you a story." And she told him everything. About the letter, about the treasure, about the suspicions regarding Silas, and about the fear that he might try something more drastic to recover the property. George listened to everything in silence, shaking his head occasionally. "Mrs. Martha, I always knew Silas was a man without character, but what you're telling me is very serious. That's why I need help, not to find the treasure, but to protect the children while we work. You can count on me. I'll stay here during the day while you're working, and I can bring some trusted friends to help with security." Martha felt enormous relief. Having George as an ally completely changed the situation. "But there's one condition," he continued. "When you find the money, I want you to keep a part of it somewhere safe, far from here. Men like Silas are capable of anything when money is involved." "You're right. We'll be very careful." With security guaranteed, the work of straightening the house proceeded more quickly. George brought proper tools and some construction knowledge that significantly sped up the process. "You were doing impressive work," he commented, observing the system of levers they had created. "But with the right tools we can do much better." On the third day of intensive work, with George overseeing security, The house was finally completely leveled. Martha couldn't believe it when she stepped on the house floor and felt no slope. "We did it," she murmured with tears in her eyes. "We did it," shouted the children, running from one side to the other of the now straight house. "And now?" asked Sarah. "How are we going to find the treasure?" Martha took the letter and reread it carefully. "It says here the money is buried in a safe location on the property, but it gives no more details." "There must be more clues somewhere," suggested James. They spent the rest of the day looking for anything that might indicate the location of the money. They searched every corner of the house, explored the shed, followed the creek, but found nothing. "Maybe the clue is in the house itself," suggested George. "Now that it's straight, you might see things you couldn't before." It was a good suggestion. With the house leveled, the interior looked completely different. Martha began examining the floorboards, looking for any irregularity. It was Charlie who made the discovery. "Aunt Martha, this floorboard here looks strange." Martha bent down to examine the spot the boy indicated. One of the floorboards seemed to have been removed and replaced recently. The edges didn't fit perfectly with the neighboring boards. "George, do you have a small pry bar?" Carefully, they lifted the loose board. Underneath was a small hole in which another metal box, similar to the first one they had found, was buried. "Another letter!" exclaimed Sarah. This second letter was more detailed. "If you've gotten this far, it means you managed to straighten my house. Congratulations. That shows you are a determined person and deserve what I've hidden. The money is buried under the largest tree on the property, 3 paces north of the spring that flows at its base. Dig 2 meters deep, and you will find a large biscuit tin. Inside are my savings. But be careful. There are people in the area who know about this money and may try to harm you. Use it wisely and keep it a secret for as long as you can. May this wealth bring happiness to you and your family. Samuel." "A spring!" exclaimed Martha. "We didn't see any spring on the property." "I did," shouted Johnny, jumping. "There's water coming out of the ground near the big tree." The children ran out of the house, followed by Martha and George. Johnny led them to a huge tree at the back of the property, where there was indeed a small spring bubbling from the earth. "How did we not notice this before?" asked Sarah. "We were focused on the house," replied Martha. "We didn't properly explore the rest of the land." George crouched down and examined the spring. "This water is very clean. It's a natural spring indeed." 3 paces to the north, remembered James, picking up the letter. They counted 3 medium-sized steps in the northern direction and marked the spot. "It's here," said Martha, feeling her heart race. "Shall we dig?" asked Charlie, barely able to contain his excitement. "Let's, but carefully. 2 meters is quite deep." They began digging in the late afternoon, working in shifts. The soil was soft and easy to dig, but 2 meters was indeed a considerable depth. When the hole reached chest-high for Martha, George's shovel hit something metallic. "We found it." Carefully, they excavated around the object until they could remove it completely. It was a large biscuit tin, exactly as Samuel had described. Martha opened the tin with trembling hands. Inside, carefully wrapped in plastic bags, were stacks of dollar bills. "My God," murmured George. "That's really a lot of money." Martha counted the bills carefully. It was exactly $15,000 as promised in the first letter. The children fell silent, impressed by the amount of money. For them, who had spent years dealing with financial difficulties, that sum seemed like an impossible fortune. "What are we going to do now, Aunt Martha?" asked Sarah. Martha looked at the expectant faces around her and felt an enormous responsibility. That money wasn't just a solution to their immediate problems. It was the opportunity to give the children the future they deserved. "First, we'll put this in a very safe place," she replied. "Then we'll plan very carefully how to use this gift that Mr. Samuel left us." "And what about Silas?" asked James. "Silas will never find out. This will be our secret until we can use it in the best way possible." George agreed with Martha's prudence. "Mrs. Martha is right. The fewer people who know, the better. I can help you open an account at a bank in another town, where no one will suspect anything." "Thank you, George. I don't know what we'd do without your help." That's what neighbors do for each other. They refilled the hole with dirt and disguised any sign that they had dug there. The money was carefully divided and hidden in several different places. in case someone discovered any of the hiding spots. That night, Martha gathered all the children for a serious talk. "I want everyone to understand the importance of not telling anyone about what we found today. Not with friends, not with neighbors, not with anyone in town. It's our family secret." "For how long?" asked Peter. "Until I decide it's safe. It could be a few months, it could be years. But in the meantime, we'll be able to fix up our house, buy furniture, and even think about your schooling." "Will we be able to study?" asked Sarah, her eyes shining. "Yes, you will, dear. You will all be able to study and become whatever you want to be." The children celebrated quietly, understanding they needed to keep their joy contained to avoid drawing attention. "But first," Martha continued, "we need to finish renovating our house. Now we have the resources to do everything properly. Fix the roof, replace the old boards, make new furniture. And paint?" asked Johnny, who loved colors. "And paint too, my love. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now continuing. The following weeks were filled with intense work, but also with great joy. With the necessary funds, Martha was able to hire some helpers from town to speed up the house renovation, always careful not to arouse suspicion about the money's origin. "I received an inheritance from a distant uncle," she explained whenever someone asked about her new possessions. George helped her craft a convincing story and document everything to appear legitimate. They even discovered some old papers that proved the existence of this supposed uncle. The house was completely transformed. The roof was redone with new shingles, the walls got fresh boards, the floor was leveled and varnished. Inside, Martha had custom furniture made so each child could have their own space. "We've never had such a beautiful house," Annie remarked, admiring her new room. "And it's really ours, not borrowed," added Ali. The most important thing, however, was the investment in the children's education. Martha enrolled them all in the best school in the region and bought uniforms, school supplies, and even some extra books so they could study at home. "Aunt Martha, thank you for everything," Sarah said, hugging Martha on the first day of school. "No need to thank me, dear. You deserve much more than this." But not everything was easy. Silas hadn't given up on trying to reclaim the property. His attempts became increasingly creative and persistent. First, he tried to claim there were problems with the sale documentation. "Mrs. Martha, I discovered there was an error in the property registration. I need you to sign some papers to regularize the situation." Martha, however, had learned to be cautious. With George's help, she sought out a lawyer in the capital, who examined all the paperwork and confirmed everything was correct. "There is no error, Mr. Silas. The property is rightfully mine." Next, he tried social pressure, spreading rumors around town. "That woman is putting the children at risk, living in a house that could collapse at any moment," he said to anyone who would listen. But when people visited the property and saw the completely renovated house, they realized the rumors made no sense. Silas even tried to bribe some of the workers Martha had hired, offering them money to sabotage the renovation or find excuses to prolong the work. "A man offered me $50 to spill paint on your new house," one of the painters told Martha. "Said you had stolen the property from him. I hope you didn't accept." "Of course not, Mrs. Martha. You are an honest person, and this Silas is known in town for his tricks." Martha learned that Silas had made similar attempts with other workers, all of whom refused his offers. This reassured her about choosing the right people to help her. The situation reached its peak when Silas showed up at the property with a man who introduced himself as a court officer. "Mrs. Martha, this gentleman here has a summons for you." Martha examined the document carefully. It was a supposed court order for her to appear before a judge to clarify questions about the property's ownership. "May I see your identification?" she asked the supposed officer. The man hesitated and showed a badge that looked fake even to Martha, who had no experience with official documents. "This badge doesn't look real to me," she said. "Of course it's real," protested Silas. "You are trying to disrespect a court order. If it's a legitimate court order, you won't mind me calling the county courthouse to confirm." Martha went inside the house and phoned the courthouse. After a few minutes, she returned with a serious expression. "The courthouse says there is no case involving this property and that they didn't send any officer here today." Silas's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. There must have been some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding here is you trying to deceive me with fake documents. That's a crime, Mr. Silas. The supposed process server left in a hurry, leaving Silas alone to face the situation. Mrs. Martha, I didn't know the document was fake. This man came to me saying he had a summons to deliver. Don't lie to me, Silas. We all know you're behind these attempts to intimidate me. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it. I just need you to stop bothering me. Otherwise, I'll have to go to the real authorities. Silas left the property that day angrier than ever, but Martha sensed he was also getting desperate. His attempts were becoming cruder and more obvious, a sign he was losing patience. He's not going to give up, commented George, who had witnessed the whole scene. I know, but we're not going to be intimidated either. Maybe it's time to take more decisive action. What do you mean? Let's investigate this man. Find out exactly what he knows and how he found out about the treasure. George's suggestion made sense. If they could better understand Silas's motivations, they could protect themselves more effectively. How are we going to do that? I have some friends in town who know his history. We might discover something interesting. The following week, George returned with surprising information. Mrs. Martha, Silas's story is more complicated than we imagined. What did you find out? He's not just a greedy businessman. For years he's been buying properties from people in financial trouble for very low prices, then reselling them for much higher amounts. That's not illegal. No, but the method he uses is questionable. My friends told me he often sabotages the properties before offering to buy them, to force the owners to sell cheap. Martha was shocked, but not surprised. So he really did sabotage our house. More than that. I found out he knew Mr. Samuel personally. They were neighbors for many years. That means that he probably knew about the hidden money from the start. He may have even tried to convince Samuel to reveal the location before he passed away. That's why he held on to the property when Samuel was gone. Exactly. But since he couldn't find the treasure, he decided to use your husband's debt as an excuse to transfer the property to you, hoping we would do the work of fixing up the house and finding the money for him. And then he would find a way to take the property back along with the treasure. Martha fell silent, processing all the information. The situation was even more serious than she had imagined, so he's never going to give up. Not as long as he thinks there's money buried here. And now? What do we do? George thought for a few moments before answering. We have two options. Either we confront him with what we know, or we set a trap. What kind of trap? We make him believe the treasure doesn't exist, or that it's already been found and taken by someone else. The idea was intriguing. If they could convince Silas that there was nothing of value left on the property, maybe he would finally leave them alone. How would we do that? We stage a fake discovery. We pretend we found something buried, but it turns out to be just a disappointment. Would it be dangerous? Any confrontation with men like Silas is dangerous, but it might be our best chance to get rid of him for good. Martha thought about the proposal for several days. On one hand, she wanted to protect the children from any risk. On the other, she knew that living with the constant threat of Silas wasn't a good option either. Let's try it, she finally decided, but very carefully and with planning. Great. I'll work out a detailed plan. George's plan was ingenious. They would stage a dig on the property, in a different spot from where they had actually found the money. They would leave evidence that they were looking for something, and then simulate a disappointing discovery. We'll do it when we know Silas is nearby, watching, George explained. How can we be sure he's watching? Lately, I've noticed he's been passing by the road in front of the property more often than usual. He's keeping an eye on you. What if he decides to approach during the act? Even better. That way he'll see up close that there's nothing of value here. They spent a week preparing the trap. They chose a spot near the shed, far from the treasure's true location, and started digging during the times they knew Silas usually passed by on the road. Remember, Martha instructed the children, we're looking for a buried can that might contain money. You can show excitement and curiosity, but when we don't find anything, I want you to show real disappointment. The children, thinking the situation was a great adventure, played their parts with convincing enthusiasm. On the third day of the fake dig, Silas showed up at the property. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Martha. I saw you've been digging around here. Looking for something." Martha feigned embarrassment. "Good morning, Mr. Silas. It's just that we found an old letter that talked about something buried on the land." Silas's eyes lit up immediately. "What kind of letter?" "A letter from the previous owner. It said he had buried a can with his valuables somewhere on the property." "And did you find anything?" Martha sighed theatrically. "Unfortunately, no. We dug all over, but only found empty cans and old tools." "Can I see the letter?" Martha had anticipated this question. They had created a fake letter, deliberately vague and without specific information. Silas read the document eagerly, but his expression gradually changed from hope to frustration. "This letter doesn't say exactly where to look." "That's what we realized. We dug in several different spots, but nothing." "And you've given up?" "Not completely, but we're starting to think maybe there's nothing buried here." Silas watched the dug-up area for a few minutes, clearly trying to decide whether to do his own digging. "If you find anything, I hope you'll let me know," he said finally. "As someone who knows the property's history, I have an interest in any historical discovery." "Of course, Mr. Silas." After he left, George emerged from behind the shed, where he had hidden to observe the whole conversation. "It worked," he whispered. I could tell by his expression he believed the story. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. But let's wait and see if he bothers you again." In the following weeks, Silas really seemed to lose interest in the property. His visits became rare, and when he did appear, it was only for casual chats without mentioning buying or selling. "I think we did it," Martha remarked to George. "He seems to have given up." "I hope so, but let's remain vigilant for a few more months." Life on the property had finally begun to normalize. The children had adapted well to the new school, the house was completely renovated and comfortable, and Martha even began to think about future projects. "Aunt Martha, can I learn the violin?" asked Sarah one day. "Of course, dear. I'll look for a teacher in town." "And can I take carpentry lessons?" asked James. "You can too. Let's see what we can arrange." The transformation in the children's lives was visible. They were more confident, happier, and began to dream of futures that once seemed impossible. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a teacher," declared Annie. "I'm going to be a doctor," said Ali. "I'm going to be a carpenter," announced James. "And I'm going to be a clown," shouted Johnny, making everyone laugh. Martha watched them with tears of joy in her eyes. Samuel's treasure had given them much more than money. It had given them hope and possibilities. But the most important thing was that they had achieved all this by working together, supporting each other, and never giving up even when the situation seemed impossible. "Do you know what the real treasure is?" she asked the children one evening when they were all gathered in the new living room. "The money," ventured Charlie. "No, my dear, the real treasure is our family. The money helped, but it was your love and unity that truly transformed our life." "And the crooked house," added Johnny. "If it weren't crooked, we never would have found the money." Everyone laughed at the boy's observation, but Martha realized there was a simple wisdom in his words. Sometimes the situations that seem the worst are exactly what we need to discover the best things in life. A few months later, Martha received an unexpected visitor. It was an elderly, well-dressed man who introduced himself as a lawyer. "Mrs. Martha, my name is Mr. Robert Harrison. I am the lawyer for the Sterling family." Martha felt her heart race. Could there be legal problems with the money they found? "How can I help you?" "I learned that you are living on the former property of Mr. Samuel Sterling." "Yes, I bought the property to settle a debt. I came here because the family is trying to locate some personal belongings of Mr. Samuel. Documents, photographs, perhaps some letters." Martha relaxed a little. It didn't seem to be about the money. "We found a few things during the house renovation. I can show them to you." "I would be very grateful." Martha brought a box where she had kept some personal items they found in the house. Old photographs, some personal letters, and a few unimportant documents. The lawyer examined the items with care. These photographs are very important to the family. They would be the only memories left of Mr. Samuel? You can take everything, said Martha. We have no claim to these family memories. You are very kind, but in fact, I also came here to make a proposal. Martha grew tense again. What kind of proposal? The family would like to make a donation to you, as a way of thanking you for taking such good care of the property that meant so much to Mr. Samuel. That's not necessary. I insist. Samuel was a very special person, and he would be happy to know his property is in the hands of a family that values it. The lawyer took an envelope from his pocket and handed it to Martha. It's just a small contribution toward the children's expenses. Martha opened the envelope and found $5,000 in bills. Mr. Robert, this is very generous, but there is no discussion. It's the least we can do. Furthermore, I have one more thing for you. He took out another envelope, this one containing documents. These are the final deed papers for the land. Samuel had left instructions that if someone demonstrated genuine care for the property, they should receive the definitive deed without any burden. Martha couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you saying that the property is yours by full right? No debts, no pending issues, no possibility of contestation. Martha sat down, feeling her legs go weak. Now Silas could never try to take her property away. How can I thank you? By taking good care of this land and these children. That's what Mr. Samuel wanted. After the lawyer left, Martha gathered the family to share the news. Does this mean we'll never have to leave here again? Asked Sarah. Never again, dear. This is our home forever. The children celebrated, but Martha felt an even greater responsibility. Samuel had entrusted her not only with his money, but with his home and his memory. That night, she went out to look at the stars and reflect on everything that had happened. In less than a year, they had gone from the brink of despair to a stability she had never imagined possible. The crooked house had transformed into a perfect home. The orphaned children had become a close-knit family. And she, a widow without prospects, had become the guardian of a legacy of kindness and hope. Thank you, Samuel, she whispered into the night wind. We will honor your trust. And so they did. In the following years, the property became not only a home for Martha and the children, but also a landmark in the community. Martha used some of the money to create a small community center where children from the area could come to study and play. James truly became a carpenter and helped build new rooms onto the house as the family grew. Sarah fulfilled her dream of becoming a teacher and gave free lessons to needy children in the region. The others also followed their dreams, each contributing in their own way to the community that had welcomed them. And Silas, he never bothered the family again. Eventually, Martha learned that he had left the area after some of his dishonest schemes were exposed publicly. The house that was once crooked became a symbol that, with determination, unity, and a little bit of luck, it is possible to straighten out any situation, no matter how impossible it may seem. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of overcoming and family unity? Do you believe Martha made the right decisions in accepting the crooked house and fighting to turn it into a home? Leave your opinion in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. If you have any similar experiences of overcoming to share, we'd love to read them in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.